And that's a big shift.
The B40, M40, T20.
So that everyone has the opportunity to go for higher education and build their human capital and knowledge and all that.
Hello everyone and welcome to a brand new episode of Beyond the Headlines, the go-to space for the top stories that made the headlines and more. My name is Amalina Kamal.
And I'm Hazween Hassan. In today's episode, we're building on last week's discussion about the 2025 budget with a key focus on wealth distribution. One of the big takeaways was Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim's assurance that only the top 15%, what they're calling the T15, will be affected by certain changes. But the exact definition of this group is still a bit unclear.
On the other hand, Malaysia has seen a 200 ringgit increase into the minimum wage. Now, while it might not seem as a large sum to some, but it does raise the income level for those who are in need, which is definitely a positive growth for many Malaysians. Now, income classification, Hazween, and its impact on everyday Malaysians has been, a hot topic of late. And this is where we want to get into it. Now, we're used to hearing about the B40, M40, T20, but Hazween, the government has reiterated to Economy Minister Rafizi Ramli that future income classifications won't solely rely on gross household income anymore. It will actually look into a net income. What this means is that what families actually take home after deductions.
Right. And that's a big shift. It means we're moving beyond just looking at income on paper and focusing on what people actually have to spend, their disposable income. And they're still working on it, right? So Rafizi did mention that they're fine-tuning the details, and this could change how we define groups like the B40, M40, and of course, now the T15.
Speaking about the T15, this is where things get interesting. So the government plans to implement a two-tier system for petrol subsidies, and we're expected to see, a rationalization of the RON95 by mid-2025 next year. Now, the T15, basically the top 15 of income earners here, won't be, of course, eligible for the fuel subsidies anymore. But there are bigger questions in terms of who make up this group. Now, the other group will pay, the other group will get a subsidized rate, but the T15 will pay a market price for the RON95.
The other group being the larger population, 85% Malaysians, still getting the subsidized rate. And so it's, of course, got some heads turning. So now here's where MUA MP Syed Saddiq raised an important point. Why announce the T15 policy if you haven't even defined who falls into that group yet? He's questioning, Amalina, whether it's premature to introduce a system when the criteria aren't even set. People are asking, and rightly so, who exactly make up the T15. Rafizi, however, reassured that they're still refining the category, but it definitely raised some eyebrows about how ready the government is to roll out this subsidy plan or cuts by mid-2025.
Right. I mean, I get it. With all these uncertainties, definitely it will raise a lot of eyebrows. But, on the other end, some economists are also saying that despite the debate, the 2025 budget could actually transform Malaysia's economy, especially the income pyramid, into a diamond shape. Now, what does this mean? It means that it will be stronger, larger, and more room to breathe for the middle class. Now, some believe that the middle income group could expand, creating a more balanced economy. I mean, that's the dream, right? Because I believe that the middle income group has been trapped there. We've been a middle income nation since in the mid-90s, and we haven't seen any significant growth yet. Now, this is where a lot of people are saying that with this particular budget being tabled, you will see a larger middle class, growing, which would definitely lead to better stability, better wages, and of course, stronger consumer spending.
Yes, and that's true for any economy of any size. Middle class group would represent the largest portion of the population. And I believe, Amalina, that it was economist Datuk Dr. Nazri Khan who said that this budget could lay the groundwork for Malaysia to become a high-income nation as well. We're seeing signs already with Bursa Malaysia being the best performing stock market right now and the ringgit performing well in the region.
Well, Nazri Khan, I just want to add here a little bit. He's the Chief Investment Officer of Berjaya Mutual Berhad. Now, he actually said that the budget is the beginning of the government's efforts to expand the middle class, as I mentioned earlier, and he believes that this trend will continue into the next 2 to 3 years because the middle income classification at the moment is well below, 5,000 to 15,000 ringgit, but it will expand from that range. Now, he also said that many have overlooked or are unaware that the Prime Minister, Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim, measures in the budget are aimed to strengthen the foundation of the general population. Because, you want to see the progress of the country, but you have to look into the welfare of the middle income earners here. Anyway, on top of that, we've been discussing about how we can ensure that no one is excluded from the budget. We must note that there's still this perception gap, right? Wages aren't keeping up with the economy's growth. So many Malaysians, especially gig workers, aren't feeling the benefits of this particular growth. And that's, unfortunately, is the challenge for the government of the day.
Yeah, absolutely, Amalina. Bridging that gap is definitely crucial. While the economy grows, if the people aren't feeling the impact in their pockets, it's going to take time before they start seeing the benefits.
I suppose we have to just, keep an eye out on how this new classification system plays out, classification of income brackets here. And to further touch on some of the crucial points surrounding the T15 classifications, as well as the broader issues of financial well-being, we have economist Professor Dr. Kim Leng that I had an interview with him earlier to share about it more.
If we can just start right off the bat, the T15 sort of income bracket was recently announced by the Prime Minister, and after the announcement, a lot of people were kind of like rationalizing what T15 meant. And we've seen a lot of updates on how do we determine this particular income bracket. But on the aspect of beyond income thresholds here, to what extent do current income thresholds, such as the 13,000 ringgit, more than 30,000 ringgit for the T15 here, accurately reflect households' financial health?
Of course, this financial health, of course, is a complex topic in the sense that it encompasses many determinants of financial well-being, you see, and also financial capability. So income is just one aspect. So that threshold, of course, what the intention here is to ensure that is so-called inclusion errors, where those who do not need the kind of assistance from government are also weeded out in the sense of that opportunity is given to the more deserving and especially the low-income groups. In a way, you have to get a multi-dimensional approach to determining who deserves the subsidies, especially when we are talking about other forms of subsidies that are much more impactful, especially in the form of education and also, for example, other social protection. What we are trying to promote here is that there should be a minimum income, basic income for everybody, so that no one is left behind. But at the very top, when we're giving out subsidies, we try to reduce the inclusion error, because for those who can afford, especially in terms of education, health, and all that, then they have no problems in terms of paying those costs.
How do you foresee PADU at play here, especially in determining, the T15 group? Because I understand that you just mentioned the government, I suppose, must adopt a more comprehensive approach in identifying these income brackets, right? Or those who belong under these income brackets. And among them should be, the loans, the childcare and education costs. But when you factor in PADU having to identify these pockets of society, how can it be, I suppose, exercised or adopted comprehensively?
Okay, I think of course, when we are looking at a major subsidy outlay by the government, especially in the field of education, I think what's important here is that PADU is supposedly a comprehensive socio-economic database, and it consists of both the income and then importantly, the wealth of a family, you see, of a household or individual. So importantly, what it meant, what it aims to do here is to be able to identify based on the declaration of income, and then importantly, we also include wealth, because income is just a flow, see, in the sense that you're receiving your income on a current basis, on a monthly or yearly basis, depending on how you define it. So it's a flow, and that is needed, of course, to sustain your living. See, but importantly, the amount of savings and also the kinds of financial as well as non-financial assets. You see, these are the wealth, the actual wealth of a family, whereby this wealth can be is a form of another form of income protection, because some of the wealth can be so-called liquidated and translate into income in the case that in case of emergency or needs, you see. So I think a more comprehensive approach will basically incorporate the wealth part as well as the income, and Padu is meant to capture all this. So that's the idea of having a comprehensive social economic database. What we are concerned about is the exclusion error, because typically all government assistance are aimed at alleviating poverty and improving the livelihood of the low and middle income households. See? So for at the upper threshold, I think the focus should be more on whether they are included or not, because that will add not just to the burden of government, but also you are depriving the more deserving and needy of the kind of social assistance by the government. So I think we are trying to, the idea here of a comprehensive database is to ensure a more targeted, but also a just and fair distribution of those identified to actually require those subsidies, or more broadly social protection, or social safety net.
Understood. Okay, Doctor. Okay, in the aspect of like a just distribution here, right? We want to talk about the matrix that could be used by the government to ensure that, you know, individuals living in high-cost urban centers are not unfairly excluded, especially from the subsidies. So, in this context, how can the government standardize, you know, the adoption of practices to kind of either you register via PADU or the data sharing is even across diverse household? What is missing still?
Okay, I think the idea of net household income has been so-called introduced by Ministry of Economy, I think by Economy Minister Rafizi. So I think what's the next step would be actually to focus on per capita income within the household. See? So even though you have let's say 13,000 for T20, T15 household, you divide by the number in the family, and then importantly, other considerations that could be taken into account would be the number of dependents, like including, for example, your parents, your grandparents, and all that. That should also be included in the assessment, in assessing whether a household or the person is eligible for that kind of subsidies given by the government. I think it's very complex, because when they're going down to targeting by household and by individual, we have no choice but to grapple with this problem of defining it clearly, and then importantly, covering as many dimensions as possible, so that what is needed is transparency, and also in the form of accountability. So that would be the way to go, not just to ensure that the aid is delivered to the needy, but also there's savings on the part of the government, so that some of the savings can either be expanded to accommodate more people, or it can be invested in other spending that have a greater multiplier effect.
In this context of, you know, ensuring that we are evaluating the income groups equally, right? Do you think that different regions or different states should have their separate income threshold, based on the cost of living?
Yes, I think we have to also take into consideration the household cost of living. Besides categorizing them by per capita income for that particular household. So we have to establish not just the household income, but also the individual or each family, what is the per capita income, you see, and use that to have a more equitable distribution of more equitable identification of the threshold, you see. And also, we also take into consideration, I think the government is looking at a multi-criteria approach, taking into consideration, for example, your location, whereby your cost of living will vary, and also other aspects of financial wealth and financial well-being is your lifestyle and consumption pattern. So and also importantly, whatever obligations, financial obligations, the loans and all that, you have to take into consideration, because if a child were to miss that kind of educational opportunity, the long-term cost is very high to the economy. We are missing ability to use a particular resource fully, you see. So very important in terms of a long-term growth of the country, we need to ensure that human capital development is optimized so that everyone has the opportunity to go for higher education and build their human capital and knowledge and all that. So that, I think, even those classified as T15, if they have many dependents and they have a lot of obligations, and if any of the individual member of a family were to be deprived of education opportunity, then it will be a loss to the country. So I think we need to actually weigh case by case and do some form of means testing. You have to test whether they have the ability to be able to afford. I think this will be part of raising, lifting the floor, so that we have minimize your exclusion error. Even the deserving from the high income family, which have a lot of dependence on a lot of obligation, if they are not given any subsidy and the child were to miss the education, then it will be actually more costly for the country.
Understood. Okay, in terms of consumption patterns, do you think that such consumption-based criteria is a necessity to provide a more accurate measure of financial well-being? And if you say so, how could the consumption of data not intrude privacy?
Okay, this is also a very contentious issue because your lifestyle reflects your ability not just to spend, because spending raises your welfare, your well-being, but at the same time, everyone wants to spend as much as possible in order to improve their well-being, to raise their well-being, you see. So consumption bundle, of course, for those who can save, for those who are prudent, for those who are want to preserve their financial health, they will not overspend, you see. So with a given income, even like 7,000-8,000, if they are able to spend prudently, they could actually be as well off as a T15 family, you see. So there are a lot of variations. So it's actually very complex in terms of managing too micro, I guess. Very micro, because there are variation in terms of consumption, lifestyle, and cost of living vary so much across different families, different lifestyle, different attitude towards saving and towards consumption. So all these have to be taken into consideration. Very important. Transparency, so that everyone knows that it is a fair and just way of distributing our scarce resources.
How can the multi-agencies work together in providing this transparency?
Yeah, I think importantly, we have so many agencies that are also involved in preserving and collecting information on savings, on wealth, and all that. So across the banking system, we need the financial sector to work closely with of course, providing information, not on the individual basis, but perhaps on the anonymized basis, so that you know that those who meet the kind of threshold, financial thresholds, their data are being used to determine whether a family deserve or not. So we need cooperation from, let's say, from PNB, who has data on all the savings of all the individuals. We have EPF, we have SOXO, we have all the banks now, because you need access to at least information on without revealing the identity. At least you know how much savings they have, you see. So that those kind of information are relevant to be part of what you call a means testing, because if you save on a, you are able to save on a child's education, you are actually another way to look at it, you're actually boosting your own savings. So if you already have a large savings, so you probably do not need to receive the kind of government assistance.
When you talk about, certain agencies or at least entities such as the financial institution to play their part, of course, the question of, the client to, let's say, the client to consumer sort of privacy must not be breached, right?
Yes, privacy.
Yes, exactly. So in terms of policy wise, what can be adopted better or at least implemented better to ensure that, the consumers or at least the public know that it's actually for the greater good and to ensure that no exclusion happens?
Yeah, I think we need to be innovative in collecting the data. So perhaps the data, like for example, does the person has 500,000 or more than 500,000 or more than 1 million savings in the account? So it's just a yes or no. See, we do not need a detailed number. It's just a threshold, whether they qualify or not. If they have that level of savings, then of course they do not really require financial assistance from the government. You see? So perhaps just setting some critical benchmarks for all the other agencies to provide those information, just a yes or no, see, whether their so-called their savings level exceed the kind of threshold. If they exceed, just say yes. So automatically will be used as one of the benchmarks to decide on whether the family or the individual deserves the subsidy or not.
Right. What about auditing then? For instance, like in terms of, let's say, for the issuance that have been pushed, or at least this assistance that have been transferred, should there be better audits?
Yes, I think in terms of audit is very important, and then importantly the continuous updating, because life conditions change very rapidly. Depending, we could be a wealthy today, and tomorrow we could go bankrupt because of certain circumstances beyond our control, you see. So I think auditing as well as continuous updating is very critical. And then importantly, process for appeals, especially for deserving cases, they must have a channel established for them to really make an appeal. And they must, of course, the applicants must provide the full information, submit all the full information. These should be verified as well. So I think transparency. If you need a subsidy, of course, you just have to be less stringent on protecting your information on your financial status. So you have to review it basically to receive the kind of assistance. So
right.
that
it goes back to the individual as well, right? If whether or not, if you think you're qualified, then you have to actually understand the workarounds, right?
Yes.
I understand. Okay, let's go into the direct cash transfers as an alternative to help, those who are economically in need, I suppose. So in the Sumbangan Tunai Rahmah, or STR, as many would call it, for single individuals has increased to 600 ringgit as tabled by our Prime Minister. How effective can this be in addressing the real cost of living pressures, especially for those who are, dealing with the inflation of outpacing wage growth here?
Yeah. I think the direct income transfer is critical, especially for the low-income families in grappling with the rising cost of living. There's no doubt about it. In fact, we are promoting, not just in Malaysia, but across the world, governments are now being asked to establish a basic income level. So every citizen in a country should at least receive the kind of basic minimum income. So we must establish a floor for the income, so that it can be topped up by the government, say, in terms of direct cash transfer, because direct cash transfer gives the individual or the family the flexibility to spend on whatever they need most, you see, rather than conditioning them, requiring them to spend on certain items like fuel, food basket, and all that. So that flexibility is important, not just to allow them the kind of financial freedom, but also a form of financial security that at the end of every month, they are receiving at least a minimum amount that will enable them to meet their basic needs, you see.
Okay, but does increasing cash assistance risk masking deeper issues like wage stagnation as well as job insecurity, especially for single income earners?
Yes, I think that's also very important. While we try to tackle lift the floor, we also need to, as spell out in the Madani economy framework, we need to raise the ceiling. So raising the ceiling, not just to accelerate growth and structural transformation, but for the people on the ground, is actually to raise their income level, including their wages. So one of the measures, of course, being adopted is to continue to review the minimum wage, and now it has been raised to 1,007. So that would be helpful. And then together with other initiatives, including the progressive wage model, I think we need to push all this. And then importantly, upskilling, reskilling, and then providing greater entrepreneurship opportunities, especially to low-income group. All this will help to raise the income levels, and that's very important because we need to spread the benefits of prosperity across all segments of the population, especially for those who are not able to enjoy that kind of fruits of expanding economies. There's no doubt in the market economy, you'll find the segments that are more vulnerable, and it's the vulnerable groups that the government assistance should be targeted at. So I think we already have established under this STR and all that cash transfer program. Perhaps we can institutionalize it, make it basic income, so that everyone must be above that. Every Malaysian must have income above that level. Of course, if the country can grow faster, we can raise that level more. See, so that depends on the performance of the economy as well as the government ability to raise revenue and do a bit of transfers. So I think that's increasingly becoming more important, and we are seeing now greater public spending, government spending on social programs, on welfare, all that. And then this is important, partly because of our aging population. So we have to anticipate the future potential issue of age poverty.
Okay, with that, we know our nation's spending habits is not necessarily like grade A level, right? I think in terms of being financially literate as well as independent, we have a long way to go. So what immediate measures must the government put at play to ensure that the direct cash transfers, it's not an effort that is wasted?
Yes, I think the continuous education on raising the financial literacy, especially, I think it's not so much of an issue for those who are educated, those who are in the universities, colleges, and including the schools. Except that now perhaps we need to build into a curriculum some financial literacy or education programs. We know that the financial education network, spearheaded by the Central Bank, Securities Commission, and AKPK, all these institutions are doing a great job, like including our association, Malaysian Economic Association. We are trying to also to promote how to raise financial literacy in the country. That's important. It's an important aspect of ensuring that money received are well spent, and we do have we need to inculcate not just a savings culture, but a prudent spending culture, so that the people, citizens, are not affected by any economic shocks.
Right, saving for a rainy day, sort of like approach then. But what is needed apart from the PSA campaigns, the road shows? how can we ensure that these habits are intuitive to the
Mm.
the general Malaysian population here?
Yeah, I think when we look at some of the behavioral aspects, how we can encourage it to better understanding of human behavior, I think they need not just encouragement, not just direct assistance, but also some kind of empowerment, both through education and through greater financial literacy. Importantly, some incentives, like what we call nudges in economics term, give them some positive reinforcement when they do when they adopt a certain positive behavior. Like for example, we want to encourage more savings. We for the low income groups, we can do some matching. You save for a ringgit, the government will provide another ringgit, or some other institution or corporations can actually provide additional ringgit to help boost the savings of their employees. You see. So that could be one way. And not just I think we have to we can think of various creative and innovative ways to actually do that kind of encouragement and positive reinforcement, and then importantly sustain it over multi years, throughout their life cycle. Basically, a life cycle approach, because every stage of their life, their
Changes,
attitudes
yes.
change, everything changes. So we need to continuously update ourselves in terms of our tools and mechanisms that we can use at different stages of their life.
Okay, but in this context of I suppose, digital society, right? How do you see the impact of the buy now, pay later system, being like a hurdle or an obstacle at ensuring financial independence? Can the government work better with these providers to have that credit sort of system that you just mentioned?
Yeah, I think they are working towards that to ensure that the vulnerable groups, those who are prone to impulse buying, they do not plan their budget well, so they will become more vulnerable when they participate in these buy now pay later programs. You see, so better filter will be needed by the companies that are using this scheme to increase their sales. But importantly, it's a two-edged sword because for those who are able to pay, it could actually relieve their short-term financial burden and make it easier to acquire assets, acquire the services that they need. You see, but importantly, we also have a segment of population who are overly indebted, either overly indebted or they are prone to excessive spending. So we want to curb those activities.
Yeah, and that age group is actually concerningly very young, right, at the moment.
Correct. So I think partly we need the parents to step in to educate as well as to support and transform their behavior towards a more prudent lifestyle and all that, provide the kind of check and balances. And that's on the other hand, on the government's perspective, they need to see how we can expand our education and financial literacy programs. You see. So I think it's a multi-prong as well as what we call whole of society approach, involve everybody. And then importantly, I think we need to start financial education at the school level. I think that's something that the Ministry of Education will need to incorporate in the curriculum because it's such an important aspect of education.
I do agree. Economics for everyone, right?
Yes.
Not at a later age, to teach them young, basically, to understand how things work. Yes.
And then importantly, you are playing a very important role because the questions that you ask are all very pertinent, which we economists explain it at too technical level, which lay person cannot understand, but you are able to translate it at least on the same frequency for our general public. And that's a very important role that you see.
I just still want to stress on the single income earners here because a lot of the times that they face, especially when it comes to gaining financial independence or at least some sort of stability, they have nowhere to go, especially when they want to refer in terms of how they can grow their wealth, right? So they resort to the social media influence that they get because it's free. So how can the government also work together with I suppose groups of like young people to create like a movement of a better, I suppose, spending nation, spending population?
It's very important that we adopt those new channels of influence, channels of shaping behavior. So I think the government cannot do it by itself. It has to engage with the NGOs, with all those social enterprises, with all the influencers, the groups that have a lot of social presence to actually develop an integrated approach or some kind of platform where the government can provide some financial assistance to let them expand the activities of educating the public and also increasing their financial education programs, especially in terms of savings and investments, and having a proper financial plan for throughout their life cycle is very important as well. So all this, importantly, we also know that there are a lot of scams out there. So we need to be very cautious in promoting these programs so that there are safeguards that are available. At the same time, those platforms can reach out to a larger segment of the population, especially in the rural areas. And importantly now, given that more than 70% of the population now resides in the urban areas, and urban easier now because they are not more concentrated in large neighborhoods or communities in the urban areas. So some kind of community programs could be helpful as well. So I think reaching out to all those different communities and then gathering all the youth together and have more frequent seminars, training programs, and then
Right.
have a lifestyle that actually meets their ability to generate their income, so that they live prudently at the same time strive towards increasing their livelihood, increasing their skills.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Kim Leng, for joining us. And we do appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Now, as the professor mentioned, it's actually more than just numbers here. You have to consider the household size, geographical disparities, and even lifestyle habits. Now, all this play a role in shaping, the real financial health of our population. Now, defining the T15 group, I believe, isn't as straightforward as we might think. Now, what's important here, of course, is to ensure that processes do not lead to the exclusion of those who are really vulnerable, especially when you measure their per capita income.
And on top of that, Amalina, I think what's most important here is that with the recent increase in direct cash transfers through Sumbangan Tunai Rahmah or STR, it could truly address the deeper issues like wage stagnation and cost of living pressures. Are we treating the symptoms without actually solving the underlying problems?
That's a good question to ask. But I like to, believe that we do have time. We have enough resources. It's just a matter of collaboration and willpower, I believe.
Yes. And the Prime Minister also made it clear in Parliament this week that the government's fight against hardcore poverty isn't about picking and choosing based on ethnicity. He stressed that efforts to lift people out of poverty are inclusive in that government aid does not discriminate against race and ethnicity. And what he means by this is that all communities are being targeted equally, and any talk of aid being only for the Malays is simply untrue.
Now, if we just, look at the budget that was tabled last Friday, right, Hazween, there were a long list of, promises here, especially when it comes to, social welfare and cost of living. Now, at least for the social assistance program, which is presented under STR and SARA. So STR is Sumbangan Tunai Rahmah and SARA is Sumbangan Asas Rahmah. Now, the government has, of course, increased the budget to 13 billion ringgit. That will benefit up to 9 million recipients. But the bigger question here is to see how these processes or how these cash aids will trickle to the actual vulnerable individuals.
And as with anything, I think time will tell. Time will tell all. It is definitely of the essence because we need to start pumping out this money to the people stat because cost of living is no joke at the moment. But yeah, definitely something to look forward to. I'm sure the biggest ever budget in Malaysia's history, has a lot to say for itself, one, and also has a lot to prove down the road. Well, Amalina, if you don't mind, let me do the honors this time around.
Right.
Okay. That's all the time we have for this week. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you liked watching this, please hit that like button and subscribe to our YouTube channel. This channel you're watching this episode on right now. And also follow us on all the socials. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and X at NSD Online for more news and updates. Again, Amalina, thank you so much for having me back on.
Thank you so much for having
back on with you.
for
Anyway.
being here, for having joined
always,
this
always
discussion.
a pleasure to be with you
Yeah.
in the studio. And that's it for this week's Beyond the Headlines. We'll see you again next week. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.